Hello, my name is Andrew Bentley, and I am an herbalist with a clinical practice in Lexington, Kentucky. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the traditional medicine of Appalachia. The World Health Organization defines traditional medicine as the sum total of the knowledge, skill, and practices based on the theories, beliefs, and experiences indigenous to different cultures, used in the maintenance of health as well as in the prevention, diagnosis, improvement, or treatment of physical and mental illness. In the case of Appalachian traditional medicine, you have sort of a confluence of two different sets of remedies, one of which was brought over from Europe and one of which was native to these hills before people from Europe started coming here. And both plants from both sets of remedies are very widely and commonly used up to the present day. Aloe is an example of a plant that was brought over from the old world that's very commonly used. It's actually native to Africa and the Middle East rather than most of Europe. But it was brought over from the old world, and it tends to be a house plant in this environment. We don't usually grow it outside. It'll die if it gets too cold or too much rain. So people keep it on the windowsill in their kitchen where it's nice and sunny, and they put it on burns. And of course, you can get aloe products at pharmacies and other places like that for burns as well. Comfrey is another example of an herb that was brought over here that is still widely used in Appalachian traditional medicine. Comfrey, we now know, can cause some problems very rarely if it's used internally. So for the most part, it's used topically to help wounds heal. And in the old times, people used it to help broken bones heal, and had people in their villages who would set bones and things like that and put a poultice of crushed comfrey over the injury to help it heal faster. Comfrey is the sort of plant that if you plant it in a garden, there's a good chance that it will still be growing there 100 years later. So sometimes you can find it growing around people's houses, sometimes you can find it growing in places where houses used to be and aren't anymore. Ginseng is maybe the best known example of a native plant that is used medicinally. Ginseng grows in the woods and gets ripe around September or so. And this is what the plant itself looks like above ground. This is a ginseng plant growing in Bear Track, Kentucky. Ginseng, or sang as we sometimes call it, is used as sort of a tonic. It's basically, it contains some steroid-like substances that make people feel more energetic and feel better in general and reduce inflammation and pain and things like that. So it's useful for a wide variety of issues, but it's particularly well known because people dig the root and sell it, sometimes as a sideline of income. Unfortunately, it's really selective about where it will grow, so between habitat loss and over-harvesting, it's very easy for the plant to have a lot of pressure on its population because of human activities. Bloodroot is another plant that has been used traditionally in Appalachian medicine and also has been harvested and is still harvested from the wild as a commercial product. These are the leaves, and this is what the whole plant looks like. It's called bloodroot because the root contains a red sap that looks like blood. In traditional medicine, it's used for pain and to produce bowel movements and for congestion. It's slightly poisonous. It's a member of the poppy family, so it's very strong medicine. Not really a good do-it-yourself herb. And just like ginseng, this is something that is somewhat vulnerable to exploitation because it is harvested from the wild and sold as a commercial product. Years ago, it used to be used in some toothpastes and other dental products. Now, most of what's harvested is used as a feed additive for livestock feed in Europe. They sort of put it in there as an alternative to antibiotics. But probably over 100,000 pounds of it are gathered every year, almost entirely from the Appalachian Mountains, and sold. And because it's slow growing and because it needs a very specific habitat to grow in, it's very possible for it to be over-harvested. A third well-known Appalachian medicinal that falls into the same category is Goldenseal, which locally we call yellow root sometimes, although there are a few other plants that are called yellow root. So it's herbs of commerce name, sort of its official name in the herbal medicine industry is Goldenseal. Its Latin botanical name is Hydrastis canadensis. And here is the root, which is yellow. This plant is widely used as an antibacterial and as a stimulant for the liver and the kidneys. In traditional Appalachian medicine, we might say that it's purifying because it stimulates the organs that filter the body's waste products out, makes them work harder. So Goldenseal is also a very popular medicinal herb. You can go into places that sell herbal remedies and buy Goldenseal in tincture form, which is liquid, or in capsules, tablets, that sort of thing. And not all, but much of what is sold is harvested from the wild rather than being grown on farms. So just like ginseng and bloodroot, this is something that people in the hills sometimes gather from the wild and then go and sell. And a few decades ago, when I was a teenager, that's mostly who harvested this plant was young people. And it was sort of something that people did as a way of getting some extra money. But now it's become more of something that people do on a more serious basis. So as economic times have gotten harder, it's turned more and more from something that teenagers did for extra money to something that adults are doing to pay their bills and get by in the world. And unfortunately, to some extent, that sometimes means that there is more harvesting of it going on and perhaps more loss of the population in some places. So there's definitely a social issue there to be explored between the need for the plants to have their habitat and their ability to thrive and their population to be preserved, and also people needing to make ends meet. This funny shaped leaf is sassafras. The bark and roots of sassafras, which is a small tree, are used to make sassafras tea. It's a traditional beverage. It's sort of uplifting to the mood and has a reputation of purifying the blood, which, like I said before, essentially means making the organs of elimination work more strongly. This particular sassafras tree was growing in a clump of honeysuckle bushes in Washington, D.C. when I was there to speak at a conference last year. So it's not nearly as selective in terms of its habitat as the previous three are. In fact, you could say it's a little bit of a weed tree. It just kind of grows wherever the seeds are distributed by birds. Weeds, in fact, form a big part of traditional medicine in most places, and Appalachia is no exception to that, because they're very accessible, they're easy to come by, they're usually right there if you need them. This is a dandelion. The above ground parts of the dandelion, especially the leaves, are used to stimulate the kidneys. Below ground parts, mostly used to stimulate the liver. Leaves are sour, roots bitter. And then dandelion wine, which is an alcoholic beverage, is made from the flower petals. And it has a reputation for stimulating the appetite when it's taken in a small amount before a meal, and also provides some vitamin A type compounds. This plant is yarrow. Yarrow can be crushed up and put on wounds. It helps them heal. If there is an object in the wound, it'll help it to draw it out. And yarrow is an herb that people have been using for just about as long as we have any sort of archaeological evidence for what people were doing. So it is native to both North America and Europe and Asia and parts of Africa as well. It's a very widely distributed herb, very widely used in traditional medicine around the world. A tea made from it will induce sweating and will help break a fever, so that's another way that it's used. And like dandelion, yarrow is basically a weed. Sometimes people do grow it as an ornamental, but it also grows itself all along roadsides and fields that haven't been mowed, and places like that. It's a very, very common plant. So that's just a brief introduction to some of the traditional remedies of Appalachia. All in all, there are hundreds of different plants and plant preparations and other substances that are used and have been used medicinally in Appalachian traditional medicine, and it would be a very long and interesting work to document them all. But that's just a sort of basic introduction, and I'm going to leave some contact information at the end of this. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'd be glad to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Bye.